monkey being creative in terms of how we're doing our Globinar today because of some technology challenges. So I apologize for any discomfort on your end. The good news is we've got some amazing speakers from all over the world who will be joining us today. And the first speaker is Umberto Torresan, and he's in Charlotte, North Carolina. I believe you're in Charlotte today.
Yes, I am.
You're the corporate development lead for Cortiva Agriscience, and Umberto and I have a shared history that runs through the DuPont company. I spent most of my career with the DuPont, finished up at DuPont Dow, and as many of you know, there is now a DowDupont, and Umberto is very familiar and been involved with that. And one of the really cool things about Umberto is he's been very involved in agriscience and agriculture and technologies around agriculture. So he's going to be talking about technology and innovation around agriculture today and really be the kickoff to a really all-star agriculture lineup. Umberto, thank you for joining us, and I think you're there with Mark Lowson of Global Chamber Charlotte.
Correct. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. So let's get started. Good morning, good evening, everyone. This is a presentation about the latest technologies in agriculture. Some of you might be familiar with them, some of you might be not. The technology that is available today is amazing, and it reminds a little bit about some movies that we saw in Star Wars or Star Trek or some science fiction things that today are actually available. So I would just, without further ado, I'm just going to introduce myself in terms of the size of the company that I work for, and so the availability, the visibility into global markets. My company, the company I work for is Cortiva Agriscience. That's the agricultural division today that is worth about $15 billion of a major corporation called DowDupont that's existed in two different entities for a long time. Today it's about $130 billion. They will split next year, but for now it's one company. Let's get started with the slides and go to slide 2. Actually, slide 3 is better. I just want to get into a big picture of what's going on today in agriculture. And again, all these technologies I'm going to talk about have been developed initially in the United States in the past 30 years for different reasons, and then they've taken ground in the past 10 years more in Europe and in many other places in the world. I'll give you a little history of that. But imagine today a farm that has robots instead of tractors that are going actually across fields, and like on the right side, have a picture of this field divided into decision zones. You see the yellow, the red, the orange. These decision zones are used to sow specific seeds for specific type of soils. They're used to make a decision about how much fertilizer to put in there, how much chemicals for protection of crops to put in there. And all these decisions are made automatically by computerized systems. You see on the left side this farmer in front of a computer screen. I mean, today's farmers in the U.S. Take at least 50% of their times in front of a screen, whether it's a computer desktop or a tablet or even their iPhone or smartphone in the fields. They gather all this data about their crops or their animals. Animals have chip implanted that can tell a farmer, today I'm not eating because I don't feel well. My temperature is too high, and I haven't drunk in 2 days. Now all this information is available real time to farmers who can make decisions about their livestock, their crops. They have the ability to integrate this data with weather forecasted data. and seasonal data. And so they can make some predictive analytics and make decisions about what is the best way to make this farming activity profitable. So we're talking about, data analysis in farming, and it's really science fiction, but it's true, and it's called the farm of the future, but it's really present today. All this technology is present today. Let's go to the next slide. There are thousands of ag tech companies, agricultural technology companies out there. Many in the States, their market value today is about $3 billion, but there's a lot in Europe, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. There are some very specific hubs, like, for example, Israel or Australia, where people have been developing very, very specific ways to do surgical type of agriculture. That's why it's called precision agriculture, precision farming, because it's a surgical way of doing it, plant by plant. And actually, they're doing it today. The main issue, the main difficulty in adopting this technology across the world is not so much the cost of the technology, which has gone down dramatically. It's really the type of structure of the agricultural industry. In the US, there are many, many large farms. There's about 2 million farms, but they are very, very large farms. So they have enough financials to be able to adopt and on a large scale basis. In other countries in the world, there's a very fragmented industry. Very, very small farms. There are 300 million farmers in China, 300 million farmers. And that makes it difficult for these farmers to organize themselves and adopt this technology. Let's get to the next slide. So in terms of, does it work? What is the profitability? We're still trying to find out today, because most of the studies are done on productivity, but not on the profitability, the financial side of it. Why is that? Because usually people doing studies on agricultural activity are from the agronomy side, and they're interested in productivity. A lot of economists don't get grants in universities to study this, and so they don't produce studies. And a lot of states are not set up to do these type of studies on profitability yet. So, it's the jury's still out there, but there are studies, independent studies that show that definitely there are returns in terms of being more productive, producing more food with less chemicals and less fertilizer, which is great for the environment and great for the pockets of the farmers. Let's get to the next slide. So where do we stand today? Think about, let me give you the big picture. It took us 14,000 years to get from using horses to mechanized tractors in agriculture. Then it took us, about 100 years to get to the first genetically modified crops. And then from there, it took us 20 years to get to where we're at today with, drones and AI being applied, artificial intelligence being applied, this type of self-learning machinery being applied, or robots, going across the field. One of the issues is that the farmers are not educated enough to make the most out of all this stuff. There's a lot of different technology. All these family-run companies, they never were exposed to so many technologies. There are enough consultants out there. The consultants that are out there are actually selling their own projects. There are many neutral type of informational hubs out there in the world today for people to really learn how to put together all this type of technology and make the most out of it. And that's where we're going. So, we made 3 different agricultural revolutions. I just talked about them. And where we're going is towards a 4th agricultural revolution. That is the the integration of all these technologies into one system that can be IoT, Internet of Things, and AI based. And as you see, this farm with these roots that are silicon roots as opposed to natural roots to signify the trends that we see in actually what they talk about digitizing farming, digitizing all of these activities into data that can be analyzed and make some predictions about how to best raise cattle, how to best raise crops, how to be the most profitable in what you're doing, and how not to have a negative impact on the environment and on the social tissue of that agricultural industry. That's where we're at today. So the main needs for farmers are really education and technical training. And these are too many different things, but that's where a lot of universities are going, and that's what large companies are trying to do with more or less success. Let's go to the next slide. In this big picture of agricultural revolution, there are many disruptive technology coming in that are going to change the way people do agriculture. One is gene editing. Gene editing means that you can take a crop and make it basically resistant to pests or other climate issues in different climates in the world. That means that the farmers won't need as many chemicals to protect these crops. Imagine the billion-dollar chemical business based on agriculture being basically disrupted just because of a technology that can be developed today in a small lab. We're talking about something that will change, in the next 10 to 15 years, the financials of major companies. This meatless meat or lab-grown meat that is basically derived from stem cells. How about calorizing and all this humongous business that you have, from Australia to the US, the beef business, the meat business, and not just for beef, but also for poultry. With these type of technologies, you're not going to need this intensive, cattling and these intensive farming techniques that you have today that some call not very humane. These are just some examples. 3D printing is another example of how people in very remote areas of the world can print actually their own spare parts for tractors, drones, and other things. All this another technology is plant level farming, which means that you get to one plant, one stem of corn, and you can actually or one grape vine, and you can actually do fertilization, irrigation, treatment of any kind based on the one single plant and the soil around that plant. And this is something that is done today. In California, strawberries are being picked by robots today, which has obviously issues related to labor. And depending on where you stand on that side, it can be a great solution or it can be a great issue. So another big change in terms of this conversion of technology is the next slide, and it's about blockchain. So let's go to the next slide. Why is that important? Because blockchain, what blockchain promises, and again, for those who are not familiar with that, blockchain is it was developed, to do this Bitcoin type of cryptocurrency, but because of the way it's set up, this technology allows you to figure out what happens to an entity through the different steps of its transformation, for lack of better terms. And so applying the same type of ledger, like in accounting that takes care of everything that happens to the single entity through the entire process. You can follow up on whatever happens to one grain to your table. So from farm to fork. So let's go to the next slide, and that's really where I'm gonna wrap up. In terms of commercial export or import, for those who are interested, if you want to export these type of technologies around the world, what is it that you're exporting and what is it that you're selling, right? I mean, there's a lot of equipment here, there's a lot of software, there's also practices for farm management that are very advanced, and all this type of consulting and equipment is very precious out there because out there they have issues of food sustainability, food security, knowledge transfer, environmental solutions. This is something that people are very interested in buying, and they have the money for it. By the same token, there are places out there like China, Israel, or the UK, where you have very advanced engineers that is very cheap, and you can actually acquire that and develop your technologies in the US. I'm just going to wrap this up. I'm sorry it took probably too much time, just to explain to you what Farm of the Future is. Farm of the Future is a nonprofit company that I set up. If we can go to the last page with the 3 pictures, with 2 professors. One is James Lauren de Boer in the UK, Bruce Erickson at Purdue University in the US. We decided to work together and put our knowledge, market knowledge and very technical knowledge together to really explain what the repercussions of all these are for the food value chain and for consumers. There isn't enough information out there for consumers, and we wanted to fill this gap. James de Boer is one of the fathers of precision agriculture. He was talking about that 30 years ago. Bruce Erickson teaches precision agriculture in Purdue at the global level. I appreciate everybody's listening to this presentation, and I just give it back to you.
Thank you very much, Umberto. And we've got some of our technology issues resolved, if not all of them. But that was a great setup for, I think, our other speakers. Our next speaker is Dannie Pereida. Dannie, where are you?
Right here.
Oh, okay. I don't, or do I see you? I guess I don't see you on our screen, but you're the co-founder of Agropro. You are going to be talking about ag tech applications in Mexico today. Where are you calling in from?
I'm actually in Mexico right now.
Oh, and we can see you now. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. We're looking forward to hearing more.
Oh, well, thank you. There you go. I just prepared a very short presentation. And, well, that's great. I really enjoy hearing Umberto because it's all what I'm doing right here in my company and what we've been doing for the last years. And I agree completely with everything he just mentioned about how the market is, how the farmers they need for this education. And well, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here as an example of an active startup and what we've been doing for the last 3 years now, developing technologies to actually boost the productivity, efficiency, and sustainability of the crops worldwide, because we started this in Mexico and now we are at 10 countries, basically Latin America, because of the need for technologies in these countries that they really depend on agriculture too. And if we can go to the following slide, please. The main challenge that Umberto just mentioned, and that's perfect, it's exactly the producing more food with less resources every time. We have less water, less land, we need to use less agrochemicals and less, we really need to start producing more with less. That's the perfect definition. So to meet the global demand of the rising global demand for food, because as population increases and we're expected to be at 9 billion people by 2050, That's like 80%, I think, of the demand for food that we need to increase. So what we're doing right here, right now, is all the companies that are working towards that goal of producing more with less is focusing on the need to actually use less resources or use them more efficiently to actually produce quality food and more food every time worldwide. Can we go to the next one, please? So what we do is basically the solution for smart crop monitoring. That is, Agropro, we have developed a platform that is for aerial crop analysis. So what we develop here is algorithms to measure, first to gather data through drones, sensors, satellites, climate stations, all the pinpoints that Umberto had on that picture for future farms. Well, those are data points. And the first thing that we do is collect them. And then after we have all that data, raw data, we need to actually analyze it and turn it into valuable information and give it to the farmers in a way that they will understand what's happening with their crops and with their farms. So our job in the process is to actually get the data from what's happening and translate it into actionable information for the farmers to make better decisions, informed decisions. So through technology, because what I can tell you about that's what I do every day is talking about farmers, about the importance of using technology to be more efficient, to actually be able to use the resources in a better way. And I mean, it is a really traditional area for them to actually use the way that their grandpa taught them how to manage the farms, and how Umberto was saying, okay, using the forces, and now we're using machines, and then now we're using drones to actually gather information. You don't need to walk and see the plants by yourself. We're going to have this technology to actually do it for you. And we could imagine that they will be happy, but the reality is that most farmers are more concerned than happy about using technology, about implementing technology. So the opportunity area here for all the ag-tech companies is to actually look for ways for people to adopt these technologies in a way that they'll see the benefits in a really, in a way that they will not have any concerns. So that's basically what we try to do every day. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so, yeah, what we talk about, and Umberto was addressing it as the fourth revolution, is digitalizing the agriculture. And this is, for us, in our case, we use drones, we use software, we use sensors. But the most important part is the support, the training, and the information that we give to the farmers that is actually very understandable for them and very easy to use. So what we have developed is this very interactive platform where they can actually just log into their account and see what's going on. But it's in we had experts on user experience developing this platform, and I'm going to show you at the end how it looks like, because that's what the need that we kind of faced in the process of offering technology, to actually offer technology in a way that someone who maybe they just used a cell phone before, now they can fly a drone and have the information on the computer and have this decision-making process based all in the data that is generated through sensors in the crops. So that's a big step. It's really just the way that all the companies that we're doing this ag-tech, we are kind of putting it together for farmers to use it. Can we go to the next, please? So these are just to also mention some of the benefits that we have seen by ourselves and that we have proven to our customers is the first one, the adequate use of resources. They can save up to 10% in agrochemicals when they are actually using this technology to measure where the agrochemicals need to be placed exactly, because they now have a tool to not just go and do the same thing that they used to do, that it's put all the agrochemicals everywhere. Now we can be more precise. Then the second one is faster reactions to threats. So when there's a problem like a disease or a pest, or there's because of weather, there's a flood or a frost coming to a crop, or after it happened, they can now use a tool to measure the damages and the affectation, to actually have the quantity exactly of even economic loss, the potential that they have on their farm, and they can make a decision that it's another benefit, that the informed decision making can actually boost the production by up to 5% more of the harvest. And well, the time they save is, we have proved that it's all 10 times faster than just walking their crops and performing inspections by foot. So now we are using technology to actually demonstrate that they can be way more efficient. And can we go to the next one, please? So this is the last picture I want to show you. And this is the platform. This is how the platform looks like. And what we do is we put together reports, information reports by date, so they can actually track on every time there's another report from data obtained with drones or whatever sensors we use. There's a report that they can actually access online, and they can download, and they can, if they're on the platform, they can zoom in, zoom out, they can put together some layers of information, so they can actually make comparisons of how their progress is going. And how you can see in this picture, we identified where the concentration of the areas where there was a problem, and they can actually go there and just try to do something about that problem, try to fix it. And well, immediate recommendations of next steps are done by our technicians, and they can actually just access this platform, see the report, see what's going on by date, and they can actually follow up. And then the image to the left was taken, and then 3 months later, the image to the right was the next report that was generated. As you can see on the enclosed in the blue line, there's a problem that we actually marked up for them. And after 3 month follow-up of really making decisions based on this information, on this report, they were able to recover the crop to the fullest of their health, because what the red points were indicated were actually problems with the crop's vigor. So there was an affectation, and they were able to actually recover it completely just by having the information on time, which is basically the mission of our company here. And well, as I mentioned, we started here in Mexico, and we were basically by our same customers that we had here in Mexico, companies that had operations in Latin America. They were the ones asking us if this technology could be implemented somewhere else in the world. And as it happens, since it's software, since it's a technology that it can actually be used everywhere in the world, and the information will be generated and analyzed, and the farmers will be able to have this technology. So we started growing, and that's our stage right now. It's international growth. And well, this is the main challenges also, just like Umberto mentioned, that we're mentioned, the part of educating the farmers and the part of facilitating them the adoption of a technology that it's proven that it will work, and it's here to stay, and it's here to get every time better and better, and we can make more developments and make improvements on an existing technology. 10 years ago, we didn't know much about having drones, but can we imagine what's going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? It's going to be something completely different. So this fourth revolution that comes into the agriculture, it's really exciting for opportunities for companies that are in ag doing things to actually make will help to produce more and better food. So that's basically what we're doing here, and that's what I wanted to share with you. And well, I'm really happy to be here, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Danny. That great presentation, and in terms of the alignment with Umberto, lot of alignment there. So that's awesome. We are going to now go to, and actually I'm not really sure where both Kathy and James are, but I do know what they do, and I think you'll find it very fascinating. They are the founders of Cowboy Cricket Farms. They have connections to Michigan in the U.S. and California, and I believe Montana. And you may be coming in from Hermosillo as well. So we're looking forward to hearing from both.
Okay. It went quiet there. Can you guys hear us?
Yeah, we can't hear main
Okay.
global chamber.
Let's see. That's okay.
There it is.
Oh, we've got this.
Probably need to share it in
There we go.
view mode. All right, can you see
There
our
we go.
slides?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Well, my name is James,
And I'm Kathy.
and we're from Cowboy Cricket Farms. Our business is located in Belgrade, Montana, so it's a suburb of Bozeman. But right now we are in Boulder, Colorado. We're down here for the Boomtown Accelerator, trying to make some technical changes with our business and really literally accelerate what we're doing. But what we do is we used to farm crickets, and now we have a network of partner farmers. So we're going to tell you a little bit about that and why we're seeing this change in Western culture about eating insects, and what the future is going to be for that.
Yeah, so as we approach the year 2050, we're approaching, they're estimating that we're going to have over 9 billion people. And with that, we're going to have a huge issue with feeding all these people, especially with protein needs. And we looked at edible insects, particularly crickets, because of the sustainability and the health benefits of crickets. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So water usage, a pound of crickets take about a gallon of water, whereas cattle per pound take over 2,000 gallons of water. So they're far more sustainable than cattle, and they have similar protein content. They're complete protein, and they have an added benefit that they have twice the amount of iron as cattle, and ours specifically have high omega-3 levels, which is really awesome. We did that through a Montana State research grant. We researched different feeds, selective breeding, and we were actually able to increase the omega-3 fatty acids. Our feed for them is 100% organic, local grains to the area, and it's corn and soy free, which is an added benefit. So our problem is we don't have enough crickets. We have a huge demand for edible crickets, and we can't meet that demand, and that's why we created the network of partner farmers. And James will talk more about that.
So right now we have 6 partner farmers that are currently growing. We are now the largest grower of Acheta domesticus, which is the common house cricket, in all of North America for human consumption. And we're the second largest cricket farm for human consumption altogether. So with our 6 farmers, we have another 12 that are currently onboarding, including a joint venture down in Hermosillo. And we're really excited to start moving into the Central American and Southern American markets, where we've had a lot of demand, but it's been very difficult to actually address that demand. What you can see in a picture here is one of our partner farmers. His name is Derek, and in every one of these boxes, there's about 10,000 baby crickets, while some of them are adults, and it takes about 8 weeks to raise them. So basically what our farmers are given is a business in a box, and we can sell them the equipment. Right now though, we sell them basically the training as well as the crickets themselves and the feed. We give them complete support, and then we guarantee to buy everything back from them. So we will buy every single pound of cricket that they produce, as well as the frass. The frass is cricket fertilizer. It's sold into many different organic farming segments, but mostly into cannabis.
Yeah. Well, what's really awesome about our network is each farm is independently owned, and they're able to focus on farming, where we focus on processing the crickets. We have a facility that does all the processing in-house, and we focus on marketing and distributing that product.
So the products that we currently make under our own brand are, we have whole frozen crickets, which go out to food manufacturers, though most of our sales are through our chocolate chip cookies. You can see those pictured here in the big picture. It's a chocolate chip cookie made with cricket powder. You have 10 grams of protein, 10% of your daily value of iron in each cookie. They're really a nice way to kind of get into entomophagy or eating insects. We call crickets the gateway bug because they're easy to kind of understand for people, and they aren't threatening, but it's still a big shift for most people in Western culture. And so by putting them in a cookie, something that they're comfortable with and familiar with, we've been able to really start changing mindsets of people. From there, they tend to use the powder in their own baked goods, and then they get into whole crickets for snacks or toppings, whatever.
Which are really fun to share. What you're seeing in this main picture, we only started last year with products. The cookie in the background is in a plastic container, a plastic packaging. And it was really great when we were able to move away from that plastic and go to a compostable material, which is the new packaging you see in the forefront.
So the way that they're basically grown is they start out as an egg. This egg looks like a tiny little grain of rice, and they become a pinhead. When they hatch, we call them pinheads because they just look like tiny little dots, like you took a pen across a piece of paper. About 8 weeks later, they are adults. At this point, they have gone through 7 instars. An instar is each shed that they have to get larger. And when they become adults, they can start to breed. The males are the ones who chirp. They do that to call for the females. The females lay the eggs using what's called an ovipositor, which is basically a stick-looking thing coming out of their backside that they actually use to lay the eggs into the soil. About 11 days later, those eggs hatch, and the whole cycle starts back over. In order to harvest the crickets, we put them into a freezer. The reason we do this is it's part of their natural life cycle. Usually going into fall and winter, they would go underground, go dormant. The strongest ones would wake up in the springtime, and the weaker ones would die off during the winter. So we literally put them to sleep. We can take them back out after a few minutes, and they will just wake back up. Or we can keep them in the freezer, keep dropping that temperature to completely harvest them.
Yeah, and our farmers, they don't just have one age of crickets, they have every age. So they're doing egg trays, dealing with the new pinheads and adults every day. They have all the different ages.
Yeah, there's no seasonality. So the problem with this current system is there's a huge amount of labor involved in it, which means extra expenses, wasted energy, and human error. And this is where most of the issues with yield come from. It's too easy to miss water in a bin, or not feed a bin, or not see the air quality issues in one bin when you have thousands of them. And so what we're creating is an automated system. And this system monitors air quality, temperature, humidity, and can automatically feed and water the insects as well. This means that we're able to reduce labor costs by about 90% while increasing yield by more than 20%. Altogether, we can actually reduce what we pay our farmers while increasing their net profit. So this means we're able to expand the amount of people that have access to the product, both because we're simply making more crickets, as well as reducing the cost to the consumer. basically, our farmers are able to go in here and see day by day, minute by minute, what their bins are doing, what the yields are.
And they get alerts for anything that's out of the norm that will, damage the crickets, that will kill the crickets off. So they'll get alerts if the temperature's too high or too low, if humidity's out of the window of being safe, and also if the feed and water's missing.
So we're not the crazy folks in the room raising crickets. There are actually other people in the world doing this, other people within North America. Aspire Food Group down in Austin, Texas was the largest until we opened up our network of partner farmers. They have about 5,000 square feet of growing space, have had considerable investment put into them, in excess of $18 million, and they get a lot of the press. But what we found is that they aren't really innovating much. In fact, our other competitors here as well aren't doing much to innovate in the space. They're just getting by. So what we're trying to do is really get away from the norm, increase the productivity in this segment, and most importantly, increase the awareness. Because the more people that know that this is a thing and it's acceptable, the more customers we'll have, and ultimately the more people we can feed and the fewer resources we need to use. This is basically who our team is: myself, Kathy, our web developer, Florence, who's our entomologist, and then also our team at Boomtown. And down in the lower right-hand corner there, you can see Mike. He is our triathlete that we sponsor, and he's also a veteran like Kathy and myself.
Yeah. So save a cow, eat a cricket.
Looks like I didn't see, but there were some chat things that came through. I'm not very good at using this.
I don't know how to go back to it.
There are some questions, and can you hear me? This is Doug.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So
hey,
yeah, there are some questions, and we'll get to those in a minute. But we have our last speaker is Omar El-naggar. He's calling in, I believe, from Egypt today. Omar has been involved with Global Chamber for a few years, and Omar, we really appreciate your help and support. You're the founder of Bloom Fruit Consultants, and you're going to be talking about the agricultural trade, particularly around fruit. And you're muted, so you'll need to restart. Go ahead, Omar. Okay, so we're having trouble with Omar's sound. We're going to have to go to questions. And Omar, if you can hear me, this is Doug. Work with Cesar, and we'll see if we can get you involved. For some reason, the sound cut out. So we'll go right to questions. And Cesar, please let me know if that ends up being fixed or not, because we'd like to hear from Omar. So some of the questions, they relate mainly to the first two speakers, Umberto and Dannie. When you talked about technologies and where things stand today, could you kind of give us a sense of how broad-based is this? It sounds like it's a full package for farmers, and so is that how it works? And are there like a variety of like early adopters, or is this pretty well instituted? And then the future, what does the future look like? So could either of you or both of you address those kind of multifaceted questions? Umberto or Dannie? You might be muted.
All right. Can you hear us?
All right.
Doug, can you hear us?
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So Umberto here, I'm going to take a stab at that. So there's no package today about the entire availability of all these different technologies. Some people have some type of packages. For example, we heard about the Mexican data analysis coming from drones. The technologies are so many, and there's a convergence now happening so fast compared to the past. There's really no way to put it together. That's one of the reasons why I started talking about this, because these technologies are so new that it's taking time to get to the right people to make the right decisions to adopt them. Okay, so that's in the simplest term. So what's coming in the future is all these disruptive technologies that are actually pretty easy to implement. The gene editing can be done in a very small lab. The lab-grown meat can be done in a very small lab. All these disruptive technologies can be implemented at a very low scale. So what's really missing there to bridge the gap is the education and the training. And these two things are the missing mile to be able to understand these technologies and put them together and adopt them.
Okay, that sounds good. Danny, the way you described it, it sounded like it was like a package. I think that's why the question came up. What's your perspective on that?
Sure. Well, that is a very good question, because it is some of the concerns. Those are some of the concerns that most of the farmers get at the beginning when we start talking about implementing technologies, making these future farms and making smart agriculture. They just see this whole world like there's going to come a robot and do their job for them, and they're just going to sit down and have nothing else to do. So it becomes overwhelming for farmers to just find ways of what's the first step. How do I start on saying that I'm implementing technology in my farm? And what happens is that most of them already use technology at some point, and they already use their computer to have some spreadsheet and put their information there to keep up with the prices, the market prices, or maybe have some kind of historic information of their harvest of their products. So they already are familiar with how they can use software and computers and cell phones and tablets and maybe drones, but they don't just see it all happening at once. And that's a good thing, because it doesn't have to happen all at once. You start with small steps of, okay, we can already get you started with this software that you can actually put the inputs of your production and how you are applying the fertilizers and the agrochemicals, and it's going to keep track of what you're doing. And then when the next step becomes using a drone to actually go and spray the fertilizer, that it already has a track record of the farmer implementing these little steps using technology. But what Umberto is saying is exactly right. There's a lot of education and training that has to be involved in the process, because what happens too is that there's some, right now what we see in countries like Mexico and Latin America is the generation, the older farmers are already giving the operations to their sons, and there's this new generation of people trying to use technologies in the farms, and they are excited to use it, but they're not sure how. And sometimes they can go ahead and try to do it by themselves and buy a drone online and try to fly it and then crash it and then don't know what's going on and how to use this data correctly to measure things that we need to measure from the crops. So there needs to be a lot of the structure for the market, and that's the job right now of the agtech companies, that we need to get out there and be with the farmers and just kind of walk them through the steps of implementing, from the first step of this maybe like a small scale of using the technologies, like a software, like using the tablets to or the GPS with the machines that they can already be autonomous and they can actually measure what's going on. They need some kind of a follow-up too, because sometimes we buy technology, and it happens in now every market, not just agriculture. We buy a technology and then 3 months later, we just already forgot it, put it in a drawer, and we're never going to use it again. So we don't want farmers to actually spend their money on acquiring technology, and 3 months later, they didn't follow up to use it and measure the real benefits of it. So that's a lot of actually following up through the cycle and waiting to see the benefits when the harvest comes and the produce gets a higher yield of the products. Then they're going to be excited, and then the word's going to spread out, and then there's going to be more farmers wanting to use these technologies. There's a lot of ways that they can get a good start, but the first will be just to get with a company that's already there in the market doing these kind of things and explore what kind of technology, depending on the size or the type of crop, on their operations itself, and what their goals are. It'll be a good thing to just kind of study a little bit and see what technology will be the best for them, and the one that will give them the efficiency that they're looking for. So, I mean, it's easier than what it sounds, but it needs to be really implemented correctly. So it can be complicated if they're not doing it the right way. But I mean, we're getting there.
That sounds good. So I think one of the learnings, this is, I think, maybe our first agriculture event in a while. So one of the learnings, I think, is that, you know, we have a lot of content here, and we're definitely going to have to do another one. We have a lot of questions, a lot of interest in everything that you guys have spoken about. So we're not going to get to everything. So if you have any questions that we don't cover, info@globalchamber.org, and we'll be posting the video here and also additional questions and anything else, making connections with the speakers. We do have, I think, about 8 minutes. So we do have enough time for some additional questions, and a lot of them are around the cricket farming, as it turns out. A lot of people, it sounds like, want to get involved. So let me just try to summarize some of the questions. The climate. So the first question of why Hermosillo, Montana and Hermosillo don't seem like comparable climates. So is there a climate for growing crickets? Can you do it in a warehouse at room temperature? You know, what's kind of that situation? And then, you know, kind of how do you see this progressing? Are you looking for people all over the world? Are you looking for mainly between the U.S. and Mexico? Tell us a little bit more about that. And just a quick question, sidelight, you mentioned frass, and you kind of clump that in with crickets. And so the frass, I think, is their excrement, right? So that sounds like it has a whole nother application. So probably not good to mix it with the food side of things, but I presume it's probably maybe fertilizer or something, right? So after your conversation about kind of how best to grow it, tell us more about the applications there.
Absolutely.
Sure. So the environmental conditions are extremely important, and that's why so much of our technology is based around monitoring and changing those conditions. And you're right, Hermosillo and Montana are not, they're both arid, but that's about all there is. You know, big difference in elevation and temperature and everything else. So the trick, though, is that we can do it indoors. And by doing it indoors, we keep it summer year-round. The conditions are always perfect. You're looking at about 90, 95 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 to 40% relative humidity. Those are pretty easy conditions to keep as long as your insulation is you know, in place, and you have enough insulation and you have enough heating elements.
Yeah, it's not too easy to grow cows indoors, and so we have that advantage. We also are able to grow vertically, like you saw in that picture, which really allows to maximize the space in a building.
Yeah, so it means that in a 2,000 square foot warehouse, you can grow about, if you have 17-foot ceilings, you can grow about 40 tons of cricket a year. So it's a huge, huge amount of production capacity for a very small area. You just don't need hundreds of acres of land like you do for cattle.
Yeah.
Now, Now on the frass side of things, the frass is really interesting because it has a decent NPK value, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, pretty comparable to most other natural fertilizers. Where the real interesting part comes in, though, is its effect on plants, specifically herbaceous plants. It incites secondary metabolism, and that means that they're creating these chemicals that generally would fend off insects. Those are the same chemicals that you smell and taste in these plants, such as basil or tomatoes. If you have a basil plant that is especially basally smelling, it's either been bred for that or something else is affecting it that's creating more of those chemicals that you like to smell and taste. But to insects, those are either poisonous or they're a psychoactive ingredient. And that's why the cannabis industry buys so much of our frass. Because when your plant costs $400 an ounce and your primary chemical is a secondary metabolite, in that case THC, it really makes sense to use insect frass.
Okay. That sounds good. So Kim, I can see from some of the posts, our member Kim is very interested in Vietnam, and so we'll probably have to follow up with that on her questions. But just in general, Vietnam and places like that are warmer and have probably higher humidity, there's no reason why that couldn't be a good place as well, right? You just kind of, you don't have to lower, you don't have to lower the temperature many times, and you just have to moderate the humidity.
Sure. That's actually their natural environment. So the house cricket, the species that we breed, goes anywhere from Thailand and Vietnam to Louisiana. It's just all along that whole belt around the world. This species of crickets is just indigenous. It's everywhere. And that's one of the great things about it is it's not going to wipe out crops. It's not going to hurt anything. And it's very easy to grow in Vietnam. Right now, we're focusing more on the U.S. and Mexico because that's where our operations are. But ultimately, we do want to bring our technology and our brand to the other continents as well. It's a useful food resource, and we've pretty much figured out how to do this efficiently.
It's pretty interesting. Most of the world, 80% already regularly eat insects. We're kind of the weird ones in the U.S. and most of Europe that doesn't. And so it's pretty interesting. I believe Vietnam is one of the countries that do consume insects.
Yeah.
So we'll have to go there sometime. Check it out.
Sounds good. What's the cost relative to the sale? What's the market price? So what's that gap and how is that changing? And then considering other insects are eaten around the world, what's next? Are you thinking about going, into other insects beyond crickets?
Sure. So we're focusing on crickets right now because that's just where our aim is, and that's what we feel there is the most market capacity for.
And that's our demand.
Yeah, and that's what our demand is. With that said, the second most common insect, edible insect, would be glowworms. And so that's actually a type of beetle larva that is usually dehydrated and ground into a powder just like crickets. So we're not going down that route yet, but who knows what the future will bring. As far as the costs, so I can give you estimates for U.S. farms. It's a lot easier to kind of pull out of my head. But right now we pay $6 a pound for frozen crickets. It costs about $1 to $1.50 to raise those crickets when you factor in all costs. Direct costs, though, would be feed, which is about 50 cents a pound. And so essentially for every dollar that you put in, you're getting $12 back between crickets and frass.
Okay, that sounds good. We are at the end of our hour, but I understand that Omar in Egypt is now available. And Omar, if you could just spend maybe 3 to 5 minutes, presuming that we can hear you, can you speak?
Absolutely. Can you hear me guys now?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Sorry for the technology glitches. If you could keep it to 3 to 5 minutes so we don't go too far over, and then we'll wrap
Sure,
up.
let me do my best. So, hi everyone. Apologies for the tech glitch. I just wanted to talk today about 3 trends in the agribusiness in the let's say in the commercial side. The trends that we're going through, which are incredibly fast. So there's number one, there's a major growth in the area where we work with. Our customers are mainly Asian nations. So we export and we consult for companies that sell fruits in Asian markets, like China, for example, Singapore, Southeast Asia. So the first trend is the growth in both import and export trade within the Asian region over the past 2 decades has been mind-blowing. And we were just in a conference in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, and the amount of data that we just picked up from there was crazy, just to see these numbers. So the Asian markets have embraced trade in fresh produce, which is allowing consumers to enjoy products like apples and bananas where they are not grown locally. So, or grapes, for example, or cherries. So, for example, the Chinese market imports from Chile about 7,000 containers of cherries every season, right before the Chinese New Year. So if we take a look into the changes in trade over the past 2 decades compared to population growth, and also examine the relative scale of local production and imports. So despite their growth, imports still account for a small portion of most countries' total fruit consumption. We also, local farmers continue to produce the majority of fresh produce consumed domestically, and they have new opportunities to export. The geopolitical landscape continues to change rapidly, closing doors on some trade and opening opportunities in other areas. So let me give you an example from my home country, Egypt. So Egypt has become a new and powerful orange or citrus player / exporter into Asia. So Egypt is now the biggest exporter of fresh oranges in the world. And that's like 2 years old or 3 years old. So the Egyptian orange is now like the new Egyptian cotton. Chile, for example, leads the Southern Hemisphere suppliers with seemingly huge volumes of cherries, like we just mentioned, and grapes. Another trend to talk about is actually the e-commerce, and how many of the Asian markets now, you have a market like China, where almost 33% of fruit consumers are buying their fruit on telephone apps. They're going through companies like Alibaba. They're going also through companies like JD.com, who works with Walmart China. Such giants are dominating the Chinese market now in the e-commerce business, and it's amazing how some of the Chinese consumers are buying fruit on their phones now. They have an app called WeChat, which is it represents their Facebook, their WhatsApp, their many other social platforms. So a lot of you know that Google apps don't work very well in China. So the Chinese government has this WeChat app where many people use it. And then the third trend in the agribusiness, and I'll wrap up this very quickly, is the buying process today. So producers have been selling to retailers globally, not just to the Asian market, through wholesalers and importers. Now these importers and wholesalers are turning now into what we call service providers. So the retailers are basically going direct to the producers, and it's a 7-8-year-old trend that started in the UK with companies like Tesco's, the retailer, and Sainsbury's, and now the Chinese market is following into their footsteps. So that's the third trend. I hope I didn't take too much of your time, and if there's any quick questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
That was actually perfect. Thank you, Omar. And
thank you.
in terms of questions, there are additional questions, but because we're going to respect everybody's time, typically these are 60 minutes. The purpose that we do these is not just to transfer information, but to give our members updates to other members on what's going on and really to identify new opportunities. So hopefully many of you watching have seen some things here today that have opened up your eyes to new opportunities and new ideas, and we're happy to discuss those with you directly or with any of the speakers. I know we do these at least once a week in terms of sharing information. The next one is a really good one on exporters, and this is the third, so it's a week from today. And one of them is one of the key people at Taser International, which is now called Axon. So that one should be a shocking presentation, no pun intended, of course. And then the week after that, we are talking about healthcare, kind of on the opposite side of the market, but what are some of the things going on around the world in healthcare? And like agriculture, it's changing, and it's not like your grandma's healthcare. It's very, very much different. Thank you all members who are participating today and as part of the follow-up conversations. Any additional questions, info@globalchamber.org. I'm Doug Brunke at our headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona. Have a great week. Take care.